Support for this podcast comes from Frito-Lay and the 2023 Snack Bracket Championship. The Frito-Lay Snack-It Challenge is underway, and fans are voting on their favorite snacks to crown champion. We're talking about prime-time matchups between the best 64 snacks in the land. Will Ruffles Ridges reign supreme? Can Doritos defend their dynasty? Or will Smart Food use their smarts for a surprise upset? Only you can decide. Get in on all the action for a chance to win up to $1,000 or a year's worth of snacks. Let your snacks be heard. Just go to fritolaysnacket.sbnation.com to vote and enter for a chance to win. No purchase necessary. Sweepstakes ends April 3rd, 2023. Void where prohibited. Year's worth of snacks awarded in the form of 52 coupons, each good for one bag of chips. See official rules at fritolaysnacket.sbnation.com.
The Black and Gold Banneret Podcast is brought to you by the Unger Real Estate Group, powered by eXp Realty, proudly serving Orange, Seminole, and Lake counties. Call 407-790-9957 or visit WeSellOrlando.net. What's up, Night fans? Welcome to the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. Jeff Sharon, Eric Lopez with you. Eric, I'm here to tell you that I am expecting in my next contract at least $20 million a year, even though I'm a diva.
Wow. Well, good luck with that. I'm sure. Is that your big announcement there?
I'm just putting it out there, because listen, I need to. It's a starting negotiating position from my agent.
Okay,
and we'll just work back from there. Even though I was on the shelf for much of last year.
Wow.
God.
You might want to let the audience know you were
20. Can you believe? I mean, all right. I know this is a UCF, podcast, but like $20 million a year for a wide receiver like Odell Beckham. Are you kidding me? Anyway,
for those that don't know, the New York Giants have signed a new deal with Odell Beckham Jr.
Well, they haven't signed the deal. He is. It's like he's targeting a salary in the $20 million a year range. Good luck with that.
Okay. I mean, Jarvis Landry, his buddy, is going to get he's getting, I think, 18. So, I mean.
Get out of here with that.
18. So, it is what it is, bro. Is that the big announcements here? Big announcements have been going on here recently.
Yeah. Well, I mean, here's the thing. We are so busy. We are so stacked with this show that we don't have any announcements to make now. Well, we'll be talking about a couple of announcements. We're going to start with men's basketball. We'll be talking some women's hoops as well. We've got lots of interviews coming up in this show. In particular, Eric Lopez. A little bit later, we will have John Roddick, the director of tennis for UCF, on as well. And we'll also, but before that, we'll be getting into some college basketball a little bit, Eric. And I know you've done a pretty good job with your bracketology on the site, but you actually got a legit bracketologist coming on with us.
Yeah, I got Charlie Creme, ESPN women's basketball bracketologist, will come on and talk to me and talk to us about where does UCF women's basketball stand as far as the NCAA tournament is concerned. What do they have to do at the upcoming American Women's Basketball Championships? That's going to be fascinating because in his most recent, of course, the bracketology, he's got UCF as one of the last four teams out. So they're in the mix after not being mentioned. I may or may not take the credit for UCF. I did write on blackandgoldbanneret.com last week about what they have to do to maybe get a shot in the tournament. And guess what? They have a shot. So I'm looking forward to talking to Charlie about what UCF has to do to get into the tournament and what they may have to root against.
Yeah, so we're going to be keeping an eye on that. So as we head towards the American Athletic Conference tournament next week for the women. So, all right. Let's dive on in. By the way, don't forget to hit us up at blackandgoldbanneret.com, facebook.com/blackandgoldbanneret, and UCF_Banneret on Twitter. I'm at Jeff_Sharon. Eric is at Eric Lopez Elo. Also follow Brian Murphy at Spokes_Murphy to talk UCF baseball as well. We got a lot of stuff going on in the show. We're going to try and fly right through it. Let's start with men's basketball. They have a huge game. We're recording this Wednesday, February 28th. They have a huge game Thursday, March the 1st, 7 p.m. against number 11, Wichita State. This is the third highest ranked team to come to UCF Arena in program history. And it could possibly be
great stat.
Yes, I got to thank Jimmy Skiles for that. He's the one who
Who are
put that
the other highest two now? I'm trying to think. You got me on
Memphis and
Calipari, Memphis.
Cincinnati earlier this year, number 6.
Very good.
So,
very like that.
So yeah, cheers to Jimmy Skiles for that reference. Here's the problem: UCF's lost 2 in a row. They lost on the road at Tulsa 70-61, and then got smacked around by Temple 75-56 on Sunday. So no better time to get home than for these last 2 games to close out the regular season on Thursday, and then Sunday 4:30 against Tulane. That's senior day. But looking back at this Temple game, Knights were down 13 at the half, never really recovered. I'm looking back there. I mean, A.J. Davis, 18 points on 5 of 11 from the field, but B.J. Taylor really struggled, 1 of 7. Cesar De Jesus pitched in with 8 in 26 minutes, but there just really wasn't enough there, as UCF in the first half shot 6 of 24 from the field. And then in the second half, they weren't that much better, 10 of 25. So 16 of 49 is not going to get it done, 33%. Meanwhile, Temple shot 50.9% for the game at 29 of 57. So I feel like there was a moment there, Eric, where they got a little bit of a jolt. When they were kind of faced with the daunting task of trying to make noise in this conference, as underhanded as they were, without Taco, without everything. But I think that this team, the lack of depth, is just based purely on the injuries that we've seen to Taco, Chance McSpadden, and I know I keep going back to Aubrey Dawkins, but he was expected to help this year. The lack of depth is just coming back to hurt this team, especially on D. You give up 50 plus % for the game. I mean, that's trouble any way you look at it.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's come to them. Now, here's the positive. The good news is this team doesn't have to take another flight for the next couple of weeks. You got 2 home games here coming up. And then they obviously,
although they
keep
this up, they won't have to take any more flights at all.
Well, I'm just saying the next couple of weeks, normally in a conference championship tournament, you would have to travel somewhere. This team doesn't. They don't have to worry about that. So the next 2 weeks, that they will be in town. So that's, I think, that will help them a little bit. And quite frankly, now they have to win the conference tournament at the Amway Center and to win the to get into the NCAA tournament. Otherwise, now it becomes a battle of sneaking into the NIT or CBI. So,
yeah.
But you're right. The injuries have caught up with them, especially defensively. Teams have adjusted when you don't have Taco Fall on your defense. Teams are, they're more confident. I think they're more confident to attack the basket. They're more confident in their offense. They don't feel they have to alter their shot. It's a rippling effect. So I tend to agree. The Tulsa loss obviously was a big backbreaker because that was for 4th place, and they ran into a buzzsaw in Temple. I mean, that's a tough stretch going to fly into Tulsa. They had some traveling issues. I know that due to the weather in Tulsa. So as I understand, they got back real late. And then we got to go up to Philadelphia. So so hopefully they come out. Wichita State, I like that stat. That's a big game. It'll be the first time the Shockers are in town. They were playing at their best. Wichita State's a big game for them because they're trying to set up the showdown with Cincinnati on Sunday for the American Conference regular season title. So they better be ready because Wichita has an explosive offense. And UCF's going to have to come ready to play. Otherwise, it could be a long game if they're not prepared to play. But I think they will. I think the few days here and now being home, I like to think they'll be kind of prepared here. But they got to get some momentum here before the conference tournament, whether it be the Wichita State game Thursday or specifically the Tulane game on Sunday. You want to have some momentum going into that conference tournament.
Wichita is second in the conference at 13-3. Cincinnati still leading at 14-2. The Knights are 8-8. Alone in 6th. Okay. Not talking about the likelihood of this happening. All right. I'm just putting this one question out there and then we'll move on to women's. Let's say UCF wins out. They win both games at home. Let's say they catch Wichita State looking ahead to that Cincinnati game, like you were saying. They beat them, beat the number 11 team in the country, and then they beat Tulane. That would put UCF at 10-8 and 19-11. Any chance that they could get, in your opinion, that they could get into the NCAA without winning the conference outright? Would that,
they're going to have to make a
deep Wichita State give them?
No, because they're going to have to make a deep run in the conference tournament. They're going to have to get to the semis probably or the final, and then maybe they can get into the conversation. The problem is not only the losses, but getting blown out at Temple. You've been blown out a few times here recently. That doesn't help your cause. And this is a very deep year from a bubble standpoint, where you have teams that have quality wins but also have flaws. So it's tricky. Look, obviously, if you beat Wichita State, maybe you have some optimism. You could beat Tulane. Now you got some momentum. But I think short of they would have to get to the final, I think, to be in that mix at that point, to be the fourth team in the conference. Plus, you're assuming there's no major upsets in other conference tournaments. So that's why I wished if they would have split the Tulsa-Temple games, I think we would have this conversation. Not only the losses, but how they lost at Temple just leaves people with a bad taste in their mouth. And the other problem is their big win against Alabama is not looking so great right now. Right, Alabama got blown out by Florida
right now. Yeah,
they may not even make the NCAA tournament, so that win doesn't look so great right now. So a lot of things going on the negative side there. So I'm not sure. The other question I have about this game, this is the return of former UCF head coach Donnie Jones, who's the assistant in his first year.
That's right.
At Wichita State. Now, I'm trying to help me out here. You, as someone who's done PA at UCF basketball games, I know it's women's games, but it's the same concept as the men's games. Do they introduce the assistant coaches in the introduction?
Yes. So you say that after the starting five, you now see the head coach of the UCF Knights is Johnny Dawkins. He's assisted by I don't want to get this right, just pretend, but he's assisted by Kevin Norris, Vince Taylor, and Robbie Lang, and so when Eric Kohler announces Wichita State, he's probably going to mention Donnie Jones possibly last. So,
and the reaction will be, you think there'll be a reaction?
I think it will be mixed, but mostly negative, 60-40 negative, which I don't think is fair. I mean, I actually like Donnie. I interviewed him a few times. I thought he was a nice guy. I think that he got caught in some of the wash from the scandal that happened, the recruiting scandal that cost Keith Tribble his job, and Donnie got suspended for some of that. So I think that, and then things just kind of got a little bit stale. I just think he got caught in some things that obviously were his fault, but other things that weren't. And it just didn't work out. So I hope it's not overly negative. I just think it will be.
I don't think it'll be overwhelmingly negative because I don't think they're going to dwell on it. I think they'll just kind of go through the coaches real quick, and it's before you know it, here we go. They're trying to turn out the lights. I could be wrong on that. I think it'll be something that people may not even notice right away type of thing. You know what I mean? Like if he was the head coach, it'd be different. But him being assistant, it'll be kind of –
well, there's going to be some people who notice. Maybe the students might not notice, but some of the other folks in the stands, they'll know.
Sure, right. And that'll be the other interesting thing is what kind of crowd they draw for this game. I know they got T-shirts coming out, so hopefully they get a good crowd. You mentioned Wichita State. It's a nationally televised game, ESPN. Adam Amin will be calling the game with John Thompson III. So I don't know.
All right.
Yeah. So I'm looking forward to that. I'll be out there and I think it'll be negative. The bottom line, I mean, forget what happened off the court with the sanctions. I mean, a lot of people do blame him for that, fairly or not. That's just the way it is because it was under his watch. I personally have no problem with him. I got along with him. So, but I think the losing, in particular the ending, how it ended ugly, I don't think will serve him as on a positive light.
I think you're right
for people. But I will say this: I think there are people on the UCF side, obviously, and we saw this when they played at Wichita State, that obviously like Donnie. There's some players there that were recruited by Donnie, so that might. I think actually I'm more interested in that kind of interaction, either before the game or after the game type of stuff.
DJ Taylor is one of them, certainly.
Sure. Yeah, among others. So, it is what it is. That's part of the storyline with Donnie being in town. It's interesting because in baseball, we won't get that. Terry Rooney is at Houston assistant, but UCF goes to Houston.
That's right.
Houston does not come here, so we have to wait another year for that little soap opera drama there, if you will, or storyline, if you will. We don't get that often in UCF sports when you think about it. It's not that it doesn't happen often from that standpoint. You know, Scott Frost ain't coming to UCF anytime soon with Nebraska or something like that, or Brent Key. You
never know. Bowl game. That would be a pretty nice little bowl matchup one day, don't you think?
When a game that's scheduled, that's anticipated, put it to that at this time. You know, it's not scheduled. So,
well,
do you think they'll draw? Well, you think those will draw?
Probably not as well as it should, because I think there's a perception right now that we're not competing for the regular season championship. And unfairly, I think that there's a sense that the team's kind of playing out the string a little bit, which is not fair to this team, because they could at least in theory get to 20 wins in the with 2 wins here and then a win or 2 in the tournament, or if they
it's not a bad year. It's not like you're USF.
It's not a bad year. It's just been a year of bad luck. It's just been bad luck. It's bad injury luck. I mean, how many games have they played that have been that they lost by a basket or relatively close, especially early in the year? I mean, they had that 5-point loss at SMU. They lost by 3 to Mizzou. They lost by 3 to St. John's. They lost. I mean, it was a razor edge, but nonetheless, ESPN will be carrying this game Thursday night at 7. But be there. And Tulane, by the way, the Tulane games will be on ESPNU on Sunday, March the 4th at 4:30. So here's your last chance to see UCF in the regular season with these last 2 games. Hopefully they can get to 19 games out of 30 and stay above 500 in the conference before they head into the American Athletic Conference Tournament, which will start Thursday, March the 8th at Amway Center with the first round. So in all likelihood, UCF obviously will be playing on that first day. So that's what we'll be watching for, and we'll see how they shake out at least at that point. All right, switch over to women's. Their regular season has come to a conclusion, and they finished the regular season winners of 3 in a row and 9 of their last 11. They won on senior night on Monday night against ECU, 75-54, to clinch a 20-win regular season, 20-9. Tied for the, if I'm not mistaken, Eric, tied for the best regular season is that right, in the Division I era? I'll have to see what that is, but
I believe so. Yeah, 84-85, right? 20 wins, something like that. Yeah, yeah.
So I'll double check that because I know it was on the Twitter account. But first of all, cheers to Coach Abe for a job well done with this team. Cheers to the players for a job well done as well. UCF is actually receiving votes in the USA Today Top 25 Coaches Poll. UCF's first season in Division I was 1984-85 in women's hoops, and they won 20 games. This is the first time that UCF has won 20 games in the regular season since then. So, quite
That's
the
wild.
achievement. I thought we had some 20-win seasons back in the A-Sun days with Coach Striegler. I know that UCF was hanging right around there. I think they got to 20 wins in the conference tournament, the A-Sun tournament. I think that's the difference. But Knights jumped all over ECU in the first quarter, 24-9. Pretty much never looked back. They were up 44-24 at the break. Let's see. We had by the way, Aaliyah Gregory, still fighting her way back from some of the nagging injuries she had, actually led the team in scoring. 6 of 7 from the field, 14 points. 4 players in double figures. Masani Kaba with 11 to go with 3 boards. Z Saunders with 10 and 7 boards. 8 assists for KK Wright to go with 10 points. And it's just another workmanlike performance for UCF. Even Delphine Robitaille got into the action. She scored a basket in garbage time, a 3-pointer. Or excuse me, it was a 2-point basket, and she also hit a free throw. So she's been a team favorite. UCF shot 69% in the first half, finished 52% for the game, and held East Carolina to just 28%. So here's UCF women's basketball heading into the conference tournament And by the way, let's go ahead and take a look at that real quick because as it stands right now, you're right. The UCF finishes as the 3 seed. UConn 29-0, 16-0, obviously. USF 24-6, 13-3. Boy, that last game at home, that overtime game against USF, just looms large, doesn't it? Because UCF could have finished with the number 2 seed, which is not all that bad. But at the end of the day, Eric, I think you're right. It kind of doesn't matter, where UCF sort of would have finished 2 or 3. You're still on the other side of the bracket from UConn, and the only thing that matters is you're playing. What color uniforms you wear in the 2-3 if you get that far.
Well, right. I mean, obviously, you would have liked to have had that USF win from a resume standpoint, and maybe if you have that win right now, maybe you're already in the tournament, maybe instead of one of the last 4 out.
Right.
I'll talk to Charlie Creme about that. But the big thing is they beat Houston. The East Carolina game was whatever, but the Houston win on Saturday, which was big because that locked up the 3 seed. If they lose that game, now they're losing the tiebreaker possibly to Houston, although Houston ended up dropping to the 5 seed. But you're right, they're avoided UConn. And they get if they win their quarterfinal game on Sunday, they'll have another chance, probably at USF,
right?
Which could be that resume win they get. And I think if they win that game, and I'll ask Charlie this: if they win that game, if they were to beat USF and get to the final, would that be enough to make the NCAA's? I think it might. The other thing I will caution, though, they're going to play the winner of Temple and Wichita State. Wichita State's the 6th seed. Wichita State, I saw them up close in person, and I've talked to people in the league. Wichita State has improved a lot since UCF played them, which was January 6th, which was like the second conference game of the season.
They finished the regular season 14-16, 9-7 in the league, but coming in, they've won 4 in a row.
Yep, and they beat USF earlier this year, so that is a dangerous team, in my opinion, that UCF will not be able to take lightly at all. That will be a tricky game on Sunday at noon. That's not if they get Wichita State, that's a dangerous situation. So they didn't get a good break from that standpoint. I think Wichita State was the team you kind of were hoping to avoid in the quarterfinals. So keep that in mind. But look, they've put themselves in position. I wrote about it on the blackandgoldbanneret.com a week ago, what they needed to do to get themselves in the mix for the NCAA tournament. And as far as the regular season is concerned, they've done that. They've won out. They've beaten Memphis, beat Houston, beat East Carolina. They got the 3 seed, and they've put themselves in position here to make a run to get to the final. And I think if they make the final, they have a shot to be in the NCAA's. Yeah. That's all you could ask. Obviously, it'd be great if they win the tournament, but we all know that it's UConn. It's not going to happen. But I also think Abe wins Coach of the Year. Last year they had Gino split it with the Temple coach. Gino gave him the trophy, something like that. I could see something like that happening again. You could give it to Gino every year, but I could see Abe getting a piece of that this year for finishing 3rd in the league. We'll see if she does. The Houston coach I know has had a good year as well, but I could see that possibly being in the mix. I would expect Zakiya Saunders to be all conference, either first or second team. From an award standpoint. But look, it's going to be coming down to they got to play a couple of good games here, because I think they're going to get Wichita State, and that'll be a tough game. And then if you get USF, you know what that means. So it could be for everything. So they put themselves in this position. Now we'll see what they can do, and if they can prove that they are worthy of the NCAA tournament.
So just to set up the bracket before we get to Charlie, UCF is the 3 seed. They play in Game 5 on Sunday at noon. By the way, the tournament's being held at the Mohegan Sun Arena in I can never understand. It's Uncasville, Connecticut, right? And so UConn is officially the host. UCF plays at noon on Sunday. The game will be televised on ESPN 3, so you can watch it on the app. They play the winner of Temple and Wichita State. Temple is the 11th seed. Wichita State's the 6th. That game is at noon on Saturday, March 3rd. So if you want to check that out, that's also on ESPN 3, Saturday, March the 3rd. Next day at noon, UCF plays the winner of that. USF, by the way, is the 2 seed on the same side of the bracket as UCF. They play the following set. They play in the next slot at 2:30 against the winner of SMU ECU. SMU is the 10, ECU is the 7. and that's at 2:00. Their game is at 2:00 on Saturday. East Carolina and Southern Methodist. So yeah, that's how it sets up. And then, assuming if UCF wins their quarterfinal on Sunday, they would play in the semis on Monday at 4:30 p.m. against that USF versus SMU ECU winner. So for more info on that, make sure you hit the American Athletic Conference at theamerican.org. Also follow them at the American WBB on Twitter.
Adam Amin, by the way, will be calling those semifinals and the final of the American Women's Basketball Championships with Kara Lawson and Rebecca Lobo. That's the new number one team for ESPN's women's basketball coverage. So,
and oh, by the way, that semifinal game that UCF would get to if they get out of the quarterfinals would be televised on ESPNU. I should say the game after that, which ostensibly would feature UConn, it was on ESPN2. All right. Time to figure out what this all means in terms of the NCAA tournament and UCF's NCAA tournament hopes. We wanted to reach out to somebody who knew what they were talking about. And lo and behold, Eric, you actually found a legit person who has a PhD in bracketology.
That's correct. Speaking of Charlie Creme, he's been a long time the ESPN women's basketball bracketologist. He breaks it down weekly, usually comes out every Monday. And obviously, as they get ready here for conference championship weekend here for women's basketball and the main conferences, Charlie Creme, ESPN's very own bracketologist for women's basketball, joins us now to discuss what is the outlook for UCF women's basketball and their chances for the NCAA tournament. And joining us now, he's ESPN's women's basketball bracketologist. Charlie Creme joins us here on the Black Gold Banneret. Charlie, how you doing? It's the best time of year now for women's basketball.
Oh, the best. March 1st. It's official now.
Oh, it's the best. March Madness is here. Let's talk about, obviously, we're going to talk about the American Conference, but specifically UCF. UCF 20 wins on the season, and in your most recent bracketology, you have them as one of the last four teams out. What's your first your thoughts on UCF women's basketball and kind of why you have them where you have them?
I think the two things that come to mind, and they're both sort of on each side of the fence here, is that UCF's a tough team to play against. The way they play defense, and they kind of make things miserable for the opponents, especially teams who like to score and can't really get into that kind of game because of the way UCF defends. That's from a kind of a watching, scouting, absorbing their style of play perspective. The other perspective is the bracketology side, what I do. And the reason I have them on the outside looking in is it's really one key thing, and it's that Central Florida does not have any top 50 wins. And I harken back to that every time because that's such a key element to the committee in the past few years when they've left a team out and they're asked, well, why did so-and-so get left out? And a lot of times it harkens back to the lack of or the minimal amount of top 50 RPI wins, and teams that don't have any or don't have anything on the resume that jumps off the page have historically had a tough time getting in the tournament. And my job essentially is I'm trying to predict what 10 people are going to do in a room, and 10 people whom I don't know particularly well. In some cases I know them a little bit, but I certainly don't know their thought process specifically. But committees tend to kind of work in the same way, even if the people change from year to year a little bit. And so history is the best predictor of future events, and no top 50 wins for UCF is the thing that keeps jumping off of the computer screen to me.
Yeah, no, that's definitely a question. I think their best win really is probably UC Davis up until this point, which is a very good team, but they're just outside the top 50 in the RPI. So now they're but they are one of the last teams out, and they did jump on you because I know for a while you didn't have them listed. So what's kind of turned it around for them in the last week? I know they had that win at Houston to secure the 3 spot in the American Conference. So they've got some momentum on their side, don't they?
A little bit, yeah. I think what really jumped out to me was the difficulty that they gave South Florida in a game a couple Sundays ago. That really indicated to me that the tough defense that they played in I think the first meeting with UConn, it certainly was no fluke, and that as I said earlier, they are just difficult to play against. They make teams uncomfortable. That's something that's certainly not an official criterion of the NCAA. But the way I'm watching the game is trying to be analytical about it, and things I talk about when I ask coaches what they think. One of the things I look for is a team easy to play against, or are they tough to play against? Maybe the team doesn't shoot it real well, or they don't run a great offense. Maybe they're limited offensively, but defensively they're really just they make the other team uncomfortable. Or maybe maybe it's another team, they put so much pressure on another team's defense, even though they don't play much defense. But is there one aspect of the game where they make their opponent uncomfortable? That's the word I use. And I just found that about UCF is that they're difficult to play against because they made that day, at least, they made South Florida pretty uncomfortable. I think they made UConn really uncomfortable, at least in one of their meetings. And I think that's generally how their games go. And I think that's an attribute. It's like I said, it's not an official criterion of the committee, but to me it's an indicator that the team is good or has improved or is at least should be a team of note.
Well, it's the eye test, in a way, because you mentioned that UConn game. When they hosted UConn, they held them to the fewest points this year, 55 points, which not many could say they've done that against UConn. And you've written about this, and I encourage everybody, one of the things you do a great job, not only do you put your bracketology, your projections of the 64 teams, but you also write articles about certain teams, seeds, and bubble teams. And one of the teams you talked about, for example, was Buffalo, who all the numbers look good. They have a extremely great RPI, but yet if you actually look deep down in the resume, there's nothing that really jumps out. Is it much difficult now? Do teams now, I wouldn't say manipulate numbers, but they know how to really pump up their numbers more and maybe puff it up more? Does it make it a lot harder to figure out who's good or who's not? Because I know you've written at length about that, and in particular Buffalo.
You're right, exactly. And Buffalo is they're a real anomaly this year, and as an anomaly, they've become an enigma. I don't really know what to make of Buffalo. And to the first part of your question, yeah, there are programs that have kind of figured this out in terms of scheduling. The key with the RPI, and this is where I think I would like to see the committee sort of expand some of the use of some of the data we're finding that's out there now, is just to look at other things or make it official that they're looking at other things. I kind of think that they are, but make it official that they're using other analytics. With the RPI, if you just don't schedule really poorly, you don't really have to go for it in the schedule either to give yourself a workable RPI number. When Mike Neighbors was the coach at Washington, he's now at Arkansas, he put together a massive binder about scheduling that was attached to helping everybody's RPI. And he said, and basically he laid it out for all the other coaches and said, if we all schedule like this in the non-conference, then all of our RPI numbers will be decent when we get into conference play. So then when we play each other, one particular team won't hurt another's number, and it will only enhance. And that's sort of how you do it. The scheduling is an art for sure. But there is a little science involved in it as well. People have asked me, even other coaches, or other people at ESPN, as the season's gone on, we talk about Baylor, for instance. And well, Baylor just didn't play anybody in the non-conference. That's why they're not a number one seed, and it's true. That's why Baylor's never gotten to the one line with any of the three NCAA reveals or anything that I've done. Although I do think they're one of the four best teams in the country, but you can't really put them on the one line because of the non-conference schedule they played. And the problem with their non-conference schedule was not so much that they played a couple of decent teams, but the bad teams that they played were really bad, and that made their number look terrible. Now Buffalo, getting back to Buffalo, they didn't really play anybody that was really bad. They didn't necessarily play anybody that was really good either, but it has allowed them. And sometimes there's just these weird things with the RPI, and Buffalo is one of them. That's why I called them an anomaly earlier in this part of the conversation. Is that the record's good and the RPI is outstanding. It's in the top 20, but the non-conference schedule wasn't necessarily great. And as I said, they just didn't play anybody horrible, and that seems to be the reason that they've been able to get in the top 20. And I'm not, like I said, I'm not really sure what to do with them, but I do know, going back to the history part, historically, teams who finish in the top 20 in the RPI do not get left out of the tournament. And it's just been a fact of, but at the same time, it's very rare that we see a mid-major this high in the RPI this late in the season without a marquee win of some kind. So that's where the struggle with Buffalo comes into play. And these are the things I like to write about when I do my adjoining column to my bracket, because these are the things that jump off. These are the weird things that come up from every once in a while you get a year like this, and it's kind of the fun stuff to try to figure out what's going to happen, because we don't really have necessarily a precedent.
Yeah, no, you're right, and it makes it challenging for the committee and for people like you as well to figure out who gets into the field, and with the way teams are scheduling. But yet, it's also a balance of, okay, the numbers say this, but my eyes, when I watch this team, says another thing, and I think that's the balancing act, right? It's trying to use those numbers, but at the same time, you also see what you see. Is this really a good basketball team? Like, everybody knows Baylor's a great basketball team, despite what the numbers might say. They're really one of the best teams in the country.
Exactly, and that's why I said that when the first NCAA reveal came out about Baylor, they were ninth, so they were a 3 seed, and I completely disagreed with that. I said, essentially what the committee is telling us is that there are 8 teams in the country better than Baylor, and there is no way that is true. I know a lot of what they've played in the non-conference wasn't good. It was a lot of really weak teams, and teams that they could beat by 50, 60 points. Which is not great for the game, and it's not great on the eyes. But if we're watching enough basketball, we have over the course of our lives, we know the game. There was no way that anybody could have convinced me that there were 8 teams in the country better than Baylor even at that point in the season. And I think that bore itself out. I think we saw that Baylor certainly was minimally one of the top 5 teams in the country, and that's where they ultimately have landed. So there certainly is and should be an element of watching the games and evaluating the teams, but sometimes that different people's eyes tell them different things. So that's really subjective. So that's why we have things like the RPI. That's why we measure metrics, because our eyes are, like I said, not only do different people see things in a different way, but everybody as a human being has some kind of, even if it's minimal, has some kind of agenda or some kind of history with a team, a school, a circumstance that helps them see things a certain way when someone else is seeing it a different way. So that's why we need that balance. We need both. But I do think we should all, who evaluate this stuff, just watch as much basketball as we can. And the committee members do. They do their diligence. There's no question that they work very hard. I like to think that I work very hard. I watch a ton of games. Someone was asking me the other night, how many games, or do you watch a lot of games, or do you base, I think their question was essentially, do you just go by the numbers, or do you watch a lot of games? And I said, no, I watch a ton of games. This conversation took place on Tuesday night. The night before, I had watched 4 games, parts of 4 games on my DVR before I packed and got on my plane the next morning for Nashville, which is where I am now for the SEC tournament. So I do watch a lot of games. And then that night I watched games from the Big Ten, the Ivy League, and from the American, actually. So it's a wide variety, and I think that's an important element to this. The so-called eye test, but that becomes the hardest thing to evaluate, because how can I know what a 10-person committee does, where they're coming from and what they're seeing, and that's a really hard element to the evaluation process to try to mimic. I can only mimic what I see, and that's where sometimes maybe I miss a team that the committee put in or something like that, because I saw things a little bit differently than they did.
We're speaking with ESPN's women's basketball bracketologist, Charlie Creme, here on the Black and Gold Banneret. So UCF is the 3 seed at the American Conference Championship Tournament. I wrote about this a week ago, that I felt for them to have a shot to make the field, that they would, first of all, have to be in that 2 or 3 seed line. You don't want to be the 4 seed, because if you're in the 4 seed, you're up against Connecticut in the semis, and that's not a good that's not a good team you want to run into when you need a resume win. So I felt like they needed to be in the same bracket as USF, so they get another opportunity at USF, knock off USF in the semis, and get to the final. Am I on point, or am I way off base and they still need help even if they accomplish that?
No, you're on point. That's certainly what they need to do. I think they're going to need some help too, if certain other things happen, because sometimes that of those available slots for at-large teams begins to shrink as we go forward here. So that would be the necessary place to start, for sure. That would put them. It would certainly elevate UCF closer to the actual cut line. But as I said, there's other things that could happen that would take bids away. For instance, teams that would probably be evaluated ahead of UCF, let's say Green Bay. Green Bay's going to make the field, even if they don't win the Horizon League tournament. But if they don't, then another Horizon League team gets in, that takes a bid away. A team like Florida Gulf Coast, I'm not sure that they would make the field. I don't think they would if they don't win in the Atlantic Sun, but they'd be another team now to have to compete with in the committee's mind for one of those last spots. Things like that, examples like that. If someone other than Buffalo or Central Michigan were to win in the MAC, then the committee has an automatic team they have to put in, and 2 other teams from the MAC now instead of one other team to evaluate as an at-large. So for UCF fans that are hoping that a chance is arrived upon for a bid or an at-large bid and getting in the field, certainly getting to the semis, beating UCF, and playing a decent game against Connecticut in the final would be where they need to start. But you have to root against these other things too. And certainly you don't want somebody coming out of nowhere and winning one of these major conference tournaments. I don't think that's going to happen, but some other things that UCF fans could root against is they'd like to see teams like Minnesota, Purdue, Nebraska all lose as early as possible in the Big Ten tournament. There's a lot of bubble teams in the Big Ten, and if some of those bubble teams could get upset maybe early in the tournament and it just becomes kind of chalk the rest of the way with Ohio State and Maryland getting to the final, that would give UCF a better chance too, because they'd be elevating while some of those Big Ten bubble teams would be taking a step back, and those would be good things too. So that's the fun part of this, is right now, this week, with the major conference tournaments taking place end of this week and in the beginning part of next, this is where the puzzle starts to become, in some cases, more complicated, and in some cases clearer, just depending on what happens on the court. But all of those things are in play, not only for UCF, but pretty much any other bubble team.
And people have asked me about this, and I wonder if you think about this. They need USF to actually win their quarterfinal game. It sounds weird to say that you want your rival and a tougher opponent to advance, but they need you to play USF, right? Like if USF were to get upset, let's say in the quarterfinals, and they would play one of the lower seeds, that actually doesn't help UCF in their bid to get into the NCAAs, even if they were to win that game and get to the final. Am I right on that?
They have to play USF. Yeah. They need a top 50 win, and that would be a top 25 win. That's 100% accurate. They have to have UCF in that game. Not having UCF in that game gives them no opportunity. Then their only opportunity becomes beating Connecticut. And I think we all know, as we've already discussed, where that puts most teams, what the position that puts most teams in.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. Obviously, UConn and USF are locks in the field. Let's talk about USF. What do they have to gain, if anything, from this week in the conference? I know you have them as a 6 seed in the latest bracketologist. What's the ceiling for them? If they get to the final, does that improve anything? What's the gain on USF?
They're actually an interesting team. I was really looking at them hard yesterday as I was sitting at a couple of the SEC early round games. I have them as a 6, but I almost think that I still think they might be in play for a top 4 seed if things break the right way. Their RPI number really jumped up when they played UConn. So they're in the top 15 in the RPI. And they have 5 top 50 wins. Now, some of them are kind of, borderline top 50. I don't know how. Some of them are a little bit more impressive than others, but they had that win over Ohio State. They haven't played Connecticut particularly well in the 2 games, but say, for instance, a team that they could be competing against, or a team that right now I have them on the same line as a 6 seed is LSU, and they beat LSU. So they're an interesting team because they've got some numbers that would say, well, maybe a hosting situation is not out of the question, but they haven't been mentioned by the committee at all in any of the reveals. Not that the committee has given us anything beyond the top 16, but they haven't been in any of the reveals, and I think they're a little bit on the outside looking in. Now that said, they get to the final and they play a much better game against UConn. Then I think they could be in that conversation depending on some other things happening. I think there are too many teams. The way I see it, there are too many teams for them to have to elevate past. But if the committee has looked at them differently and has them more in the 18-19 range rather than in the 23-24 range where I have them, then a circumstance like I just mentioned, getting to the final and playing well against UConn, could be enough to get them into the top 16 and get them hosting. I know Jose Fernandez would really, really like that.
Yeah, no, and I know
he's pointed out some things to me. He said, Charlie, this is us compared to this team, and this is us compared to that team. And I agreed with him. He made very valid points and arguments in the data. They're facts, but the issue there is the committee's already spoken on some of these teams. We know the committee's put them in the top 16. So breaking through past those teams is a little more difficult because of these reveals. We kind of know where the committee's thinking on at least certain things.
No, and I spoke to him recently when I called one of his games, and he acknowledged that the loss to Wichita State really kind of still haunts him a little bit because that took a major hit in the RPI, and he felt that if they would have beaten Wichita State, that maybe they'd be in a better position to host right now than if they would instead of losing that game. Is teams like USF and UCF being hurt this year by the league being down in the American compared to last year? I know they've had some injuries. I've written about this, where one of the things that's hurting UCF's case is that the American this year is down with, partly things they can't control. SMU is down. They lost their star player, Alicia Froling, for the year, so they've been down. Temple, which was an NCAA tournament team last year, lost their star point guard, Alicia Butts, to an ACL, so they're way down this year. So the league is down compared to last year. Is that what's hurting the USFs and UCFs as far as their resumes?
It is, to a large degree, yes, because there just aren't that many opportunities to get quality wins. And so some of the games that you play are essentially meaningless to the resume. Memphis has had a ton of injuries too. When you're talking about teams that are outside the top 150 in the RPI, they're almost throwaways in terms of resume building, and there's too much of that in the league this year. So yeah, it has hurt. Now, UCF's numbers haven't been. USF's numbers haven't been crushed by it because they are, like I said, top 15 in the RPI now. But it's taken 2 games against Connecticut to get them there. UCF's situation certainly has been hurt by that. I think they would have. I mean, 44 is not a bad number. 44 is a decent number. That it's a very bubble team type number in terms of the RPI. And what the RPI does, it kind of sets the tone for the whole evaluation process by the committee. That's how they kind of group teams by their RPI, and then they start to have discussions about them and vote on them in these groups. And if say Temple were the Temple that we've seen the last couple of years, they would have been another top 50 RPI team that everybody would have had a chance to play, and that would have been a big boost potentially certainly to UCF, and they just don't have that this year. So you're right. It's the league, the bottom half of the league, or the fact that nobody else really, other than Houston, no one else has even really had a decent season, does hurt when you have to play them. And then you have to go back to the non-conference schedule to give you enough. And in UCF's case, probably not quite enough, at least at this point.
Last thing, UConn is the number 1 overall seed. Are they a lock, or could a team like Mississippi State, you're at the SEC Champ Tournament, they're a team that made it to the national title game last year. They've been undefeated. If Mississippi State were to win the SEC Tournament, which is a better league in most regard than the American, could they sneak in over UConn as the overall number 1 seed, or is UConn a lock as the number 1 overall seed?
No, I think you raise actually an interesting point. Connecticut would obviously have to lose. So if Connecticut wins out and wins the American tournament, they would be the number 1 seed no matter what Mississippi State does. But say there's an upset and Connecticut doesn't win the tournament and Mississippi State does continue to sweep through the SEC and wins it, I think Mississippi State would then be the overall number 1. But it doesn't happen without a Connecticut loss. And since we have never seen that before in the American, again, history is a predictor of future events. We haven't seen that happen, so I wouldn't anticipate it. But that said, let's just say, this time of year is all about hypotheticals. This is the fun part. Let's just say Connecticut loses to, let's just say for fun, they lose to UCF in the final, and UCF gets into the field as the automatic qualifier, and Mississippi State wins it all. It won't change the actual layout of the bracket. Connecticut would still go to Albany, and Mississippi State would still go to Kansas City. So that part of it would be a nice thing for Vic Schaefer to say, we were the number 1 overall seed in the NCAA tournament one year. But in terms of once they start playing the games in the tournament, once the bracket would be laid out, it would look no different than it looks today. Okay,
well, I'll tell you what, you made some UCF fans became fans of yours with that last statement. Hey, if they beat Connecticut, I'll tell you. Charlie Creme, everybody, women's basketball bracketologist for ESPN. Check out ESPN.com. Charlie Creme's on Twitter, and he's going to be updating this leading up until Selection Monday night, a week from this Monday when the women's basketball selection show comes out and we find out who the teams of 64 are. Charlie, I appreciate you taking the time explaining kind of the behind the scenes and how this works because, as you know, there's a lot of bandwagon fans and fans or casual fans that this time of year they kind of hop on and are wondering what's going on and what do they need to root for. So you do an incredible job. And I appreciate you taking the time from your busy schedule to teaching us a little bit of what to expect and how things work.
Oh, it was great to do it. I always love talking about this stuff. I can't get enough this time of year, so any conversation I can have about it is a welcome one to me.
That's awesome, Charlie. I'll get you try to take a nap here and there between all this basketball between now and we're going to see in the next week or so, buddy. Take care.
Sleep is a very valuable commodity this time of year for sure.
All right, man. Enjoy the SEC tournament, and we'll be looking forward to seeing those bracketologists, and we'll talk to you down the road.
Well, thanks so much.
And thanks again to Charlie Creme, ESPN women's basketball bracketologist. You can follow him on Twitter on Charlie Creme, at Charlie Creme on Twitter, and keep that bracket. He'll be updating that. And between now and Selection Monday, which will be the Monday night after the men's selection show, will be Monday night. That's it's kind of unique. It will not be this Monday, but the following Monday when we'll find out.
Right.
And the NCAA tournament chances. So interesting stuff he had to say. You may agree with some of it. You may not agree with some of it. But look, the bottom line, Jeff, I think regardless of how you feel, what they need to do, don't need to do, or whatever, just got to win games, right? You win games, and you hope that it takes care of itself. I think I'm going to stick to it. Get to the final, and we'll see what happens.
It's interesting that we do all this kvetching about this, and we're like, well, wait a second. If you win, you don't have to worry about it. So just win the bloody games, for crying out loud. So, all right. Let's take a quick break. And when we get back, we will talk tennis. Actually, we got tennis on tap. We got baseball on tap. We got to catch up with softball on tap. And we will have John Roddick, the director of tennis at UCF, joining us here on the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. Stick around. We are back after this. The Black and Gold Banneret Podcast is brought to you by the Unger Real Estate Group, powered by eXp Realty. Sam Unger and his team proudly serve Orange, Seminole, and Lake counties, specializing in buying, selling, and new construction. Sam is a proud UCF graduate, class of 2006, and he's such a dedicated Knight fan that right now, if you work with him as your realtor, he will donate a portion of his commission to the UCF Football Excellence Fund in your name. So if you're ready to buy a new home or sell your current home, upgrade or downsize, Sam and his team have you covered so you can find the right home at the right price in the right location. So give him a call right now at 407-790-9957. Again, that's 407-790-9957. Or visit on the web at WeSellOrlando.net. Again, that's WeSellOrlando.net. You can also reach them on Facebook at facebook.com/WeSellOrlando. Get in touch with the Unger Real Estate Group today and make finding your dream home a reality.
Hello, Knight Nation. I'm Andrew Fegley.
And I'm Trey Strelko. Where are we? This isn't our usual spot.
It looks like we've landed in the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast.
Oh, yeah. I've heard of those guys.
You know, Nightline has UCF sports covered.
Week in and week out, we bring you interviews with newsmakers and in-depth analysis of UCF sports.
Subscribe to our weekly podcast on iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Be sure to subscribe to Nightline on YouTube, like us on Facebook, and follow us on Twitter at UCF_Nightline.
Trace, can we go back to the 1148 studios now and start working on our next all-new Nightline?
How do we get out of here? Go Knights!
Charge on.
Now back to you guys in the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast.
All right, welcome back to the show. Jeff Sharon, Eric Lopez with you. Black and Gold Banneret Podcast is available on iTunes, Google Play, SoundCloud, Stitcher, and TuneIn. So if you haven't yet, leave us a rating and tell your friends to subscribe, too. You can also hit us up at Twitter at UCF_Banneret and Facebook.com/Black and Gold Banneret as well. All right. Special, it's a double interview show, Eric. So this is a really special one for everybody, and we've got a really great guest that we're having on once again this year. UCF tennis has turned a corner, my friend. Now you may remember a couple of weeks ago we had Brian Kaneko on. He's the women's tennis coach, and now we're going to have his boss on, the director of tennis and the head coach of the UCF men's tennis team. John Roddick. They have a big weekend coming up. They are 4-2 right now on the season, and they have got a murderer's row in the schedule coming up, but it's all at home at the USTA National Campus, which is down by Lake Nona. It starts on Saturday with a match against Michigan at 12:30, which, by the way, is so big with this big tennis weekend coming up down there that there will be a bus service taking students down, a shuttle service down to the USTA National Campus starting at 11 a.m. First come, first serve. Only 42 spots available for that. So if you get the chance, if you're a student or listening, make sure and you're looking for some of that to get down to USTA College Match Day at the USTA National Campus. Make sure you do that. So, Eric Lopez, I know how much of a big tennis fan you are. You're so excited to talk to John, and we're going to dive into it in just a second. But just give us the lay of the land right now for this team, because it feels like they're on the verge of getting hot as they begin to test themselves against the competition coming up in the schedule.
Well, and it's going to start this Saturday. I mean, Michigan's a top 10 program in men's tennis. This is, by the way, I mean, this is not just men's tennis, but women's tennis is playing Michigan at the same time on 12:30. This match, they will be carried on the Tennis Channel. That's a big deal. I mean, you could help me out. I don't remember UCF ever being on television.
I don't think I've ever recalled UCF tennis ever being televised. Aside from something that may have that maybe I shot. You know?
Right, and that's one of the things I'll talk to Coach Roddick about is the exposure of college tennis now on television. We'll talk about that, of course, as part of College Match Day, but it's a big stretch for this team as they try to get back into the NCAA tournament. And the women's team's doing great, and the men's team is getting going. They're coming off the win against Stetson. They've won 4 in a row, but now we're going to see where they stack up against Michigan. It's a young roster, but that's some of the things we'll be talking to Coach Roddick about, among many topics. Of course, we had him on about a year and a half ago when he first arrived here. And once again, Jeff, exclusive here on Black Gold Banneret, we'll have Coach Roddick again here momentarily to talk about the state of the program and what's ahead.
All right. So without further ado, here is Eric Lopez's interview with UCF men's tennis head coach and director of tennis, John Roddick.
And joining us now here is the head coach of the UCF men's tennis team. They will be in action on Saturday at home at the USTA Center as they'll take on Michigan, a match that will be shown on the Tennis Channel. It's part of College Match Day. And the director of tennis and head coach of UCF tennis, John Roddick, joins us here. And, Coach, how you doing?
Hey there. Great. Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Let's talk about this match first, a big one against Michigan. It'll be nationally televised on the Tennis Channel. It's part of College Match Day. First, explain for the audience that may not be aware, what is College Match Day?
Well, College Match Day is an initiative that the USTA started, obviously with the development of Lake Nona and the USTA National Campus down there, and they've been bringing some of the top teams from around the country in, and they've really tried to promote just televising college tennis, and they think it's a great product for TV, and so they've been on the forefront of trying to televise a lot of matches, and so with our home being there, we're included in 2 of those matches this year. Our women's team is also playing Michigan at the same time, so that's kind of another interesting to have. Our facilities are built where you can actually have simultaneous matches, so you can watch the women on one side and the men on the other. And so, it's just a neat initiative. And I always wondered as being a tennis person all my life. And then once I became a college tennis player, I wondered why college tennis wasn't on TV, because the team format is a very, very exciting format. It's probably one of the more exciting ways to watch tennis. And the Division I level is a very high level. So, you would think it would lend itself to it, but it's just, I think through costs and things like that, it was always very difficult. And the USTA is starting to solve a lot of those problems. And these are just great events for fans, too.
And great exposure, as you mentioned. For a while, I wondered the same thing, why we didn't see more college tennis on television. But slowly but surely we're seeing more of it now. The postseason's being carried, and you mentioned the Tennis Channel's carrying this. So, and I think it's helped, too, don't you think, with a lot of the professional players that have had success in college recently, so more people are curious now with college program and college tennis.
Yeah, you've had several top players in the last 15 years come out, and Kevin Anderson, finalist of the U.S. Open last year, James Blake, Steve Johnson, been a member of Davis Cup, an Olympic medalist, and John Isner, been a top 10 player and a consistent, really top 15 almost all the time. So there's been a lot more emphasis, and I think a lot of players around the world are viewing college as a much more viable pathway to play professionally, just like a lot of other sports at the NCAA level. So. And with those players' success, and there's this, you didn't even mention all the guys that are earning a living that played college tennis. So it's just becoming something that I think college tennis maybe lost a little bit in the late '80s and '90s and maybe early part of this century.
Let's talk about your program. Of course, you're coming in 4-2 this season. You're fresh off in your first season where you made the NCAA Tournament, going 16-7. Got to the American Conference Championship match, which was held at the USTA Center. You finished 33rd ranked in the Oracle ITA rankings. As you're a year now going into your second season here, do you feel you're actually ahead of schedule where you're at, or you feel like you're at where you thought you'd be?
Well, I think our recruiting went really well. The first summer I was here, we got a lot of transfers, and that's really what we needed at that time. And just with short turnaround. I mean, our signing period, it's not like football where, coaches are changing jobs and as tennis coaches or other sports, we kind of laugh like, oh, they've only got a month. Well, when we change, we have zero. The signing period is already a month and a half gone. And so there's really not, much you can do. So, but there's always kids that are looking to transfer and things. So, we did a good job with that and got a lot of the top transfers, or really probably all of them actually the first year. And then we had a very, kind of a senior-laden, junior-laden team last year, with a bunch of kids that came together as a team that weren't teammates for 4 years, and so that was a fun year, and I felt like we did a really good job overachieving. And then this year's dynamic is, probably the polar opposite, where we still have two of the players that transferred, is actually the two that transferred from Alabama, and then we have 4 freshmen playing, and then really 5 out of our top 7 are freshmen. So we have this dynamic where, from a coaching standpoint, it's, we're very good at times because our recruiting class of 4 freshmen brought in was one of the top 2 or 3, 4 classes in the country. But then at the same time that you are dealing with youth and the level difference from juniors to Division I is big. So we have we have a learning curve, whether the players sometimes like to realize that or not.
And you mentioned, your roster, it's an international field where you got players that are from Brazil, Ukraine, India, Spain, Mexico, Russia, and Finland. Just talk about the international players coming to the States, coming to college, and playing college tennis, and how that impacts from a recruiting standpoint, and just kind of the influence that the international players have had in the college game.
Yeah, it's our team's not unique in that respect. I mean, tennis is such a global sport, and it translates to the D1 level at the same time. I mean, even back in the 90s when I played, my friends and I, we counted up one time. It was there was only 12 Americans in the top 75 of the rankings, so of the national rankings in the singles. So our sport has always been heavily international. We have also 2 Americans in our starting lineup too. So we recruit globally. Me as a head coach and recruiter, I don't really tend to worry too much about where they're from. I tend to worry about the character and the ability, and are they going to do well in school? We don't want those are just issues as a coach in our sport that I don't feel like we really need to have to deal with if you recruit the right way and those things. And so our team had the highest GPA in the department in the fall, and they're on track in tennis to start getting to the reaching the goals we want. And so it's a very diverse group we have, and that's in tennis we're so used to it, and I don't even think twice when you have people speaking English with different accents everywhere, and for as a tennis player and a coach at a high level, when you travel, that's what it is, and so our sport is just so global.
Talk about the roster. Of course, you got Alan Rubio, who's nationally is ranked in singles competition. You got Corey Lovett, who's ranked in the doubles. Just talk about the roster that you have here in 2018, and for fans that are going to go out and watch you play either this Saturday against Michigan or throughout the season.
Yeah, well, Corey Lovett's from North Carolina. He's been playing number 1 for us. He was ranked 35 in the country last year, and he just hasn't played any college tournaments this year, so he'll be back in those rankings here shortly. And he'll be, one of the players probably, vying to make the field of 64 for the singles. So he's been a top of the lineup player both at Alabama and here now at UCF. So, he's a guy that we count on in singles and doubles to kind of anchor the top of our lineup. And Alan has been playing great. He just played the ATP 500 down in Acapulco, the qualies, and lost in 3 sets to a guy ranked, it's been a top 100 player in the world. So that was even in a loss, that's a very good result for a young player to just to compete at that level and make the match tough. A lot of times you see players get those wild cards like that and they lose, 1-1 or 2-1. And, Alan really pushed and did a great job getting into a 3rd set. So that was very encouraging. And then Gabriel DeCamps has been playing great for Brazil. He was one of the top recruits last year in the country coming in. He had a slow finish to his junior year, coming out of juniors. I mean, not his junior year in college, but coming out of juniors, he didn't finish strong, and he's really started to come on and has a solid record playing 2 for us. So, and Mikhail Sokolovsky's, really starting to play well too from Moscow. So, we're heading the right way. It's just, you need 6 guys going the right way at the same time, and so we're still figuring that stuff out. But I think, as this year goes on, the team has a lot of room for improvement, and our ability level's high. So, I keep telling them every day, we just have to, take the bat and deal with it. And it's really going to, it's going to depend how we deal with the things that don't go our way, how we react to it. I think that's how good our team will be. We've got the ability.
And so you put this team together and you decide, all right, who plays doubles together and who's singles and in what order. Just tell the audience what goes in the thinking process as far as a coach when you built this tennis team, because obviously you got individuals who can do individual things, but at the same time, you're trying to win as a team.
Yeah, tennis is that way. I mean, it's a nice thing for us. We have 6 balls, so we don't really have to worry about playing time. The only bad thing for tennis players is either you're getting 100% of the playing time or 0. Every now and then you get a guy that just plays double or something like that, but we're not worrying about minutes and snaps and stuff like that. So you're either in tennis, you're either in or you're out, and so that makes it a little bit easier for us. But it's also probably the toughest thing I do is to tell a kid that he's not playing, and because I can't get him minutes, so that's probably the hardest part. And then organizing the doubles lineup it's a little bit hit or miss. I mean, we changed it. I mean, one year at Oklahoma, when I was at Oklahoma, we ended up making the NCAA finals as a team, but I blew up my doubles lineup 2 days before the NCAA tournament. So when we had to turn our lineups in, I went with 3 brand new teams because we just, for whatever reason, we couldn't get it right. And then, the last move was the one that worked out well, and we only lost 1 doubles point the whole tournament. So and we won the doubles point in the final. So it's a little bit of a hit or miss, kind of guessing game, and it's very strange. You feel like as a coach, you see enough, you should know who's going to play well together. But the more I think I have the answer, the more I'm wrong on it. So it's really you have to be willing to experiment with it and not be afraid to make changes and let guys play. Or if they're in a slump, just change it. It's kind of like a pitcher, I guess. When you see guys start struggling in doubles, it happens really fast. You gotta get them out and make a change. And so I've learned to it's really not really having a great idea. It's just you got to have a feel when to make a move.
We're speaking with UCF men's tennis coach and director of tennis of UCF, John Roddick, here on the Black and Gold Banneret. UCF will take on Michigan, 12:30 on the Tennis Channel, part of College Match Day. The men and the women will play against Michigan. And I want to ask you about the women's program because you oversee them as the director of tennis. They're ranked 36 in the latest ITA rankings. We had Brian Kaneko on here recently. Just talk about the job he's doing and kind of seeing what the women are doing. They're off to an incredible start this year. Are they maybe even ahead of schedule what you might have thought?
Yeah, I mean, it's they're in a similar position as we are. I mean, they had some good success last year. They didn't make the NCAA tournament, but they won as I don't know all the records of UCF on the men's or the women's side. It's not something I pay a lot of attention to, but I know they had more wins than they'd had in a while.
Yep.
Last year. And then this year, they recruited really well. So they're coming in with a little bit of confidence, and their talent level went up with their recruiting. So, but they're also dealing with some of the same things that we deal with, where you're young, and when you're young, you're going to be a little inconsistent. And they've had some great wins, and I know they've had 1 or 2 matches that they'd like back, just like we have. But yeah, I would say they're very far ahead of schedule because I've been doing this for a long time now, and I know if you stack 2 or 3 good recruiting classes together. You can end up in the top 10 or top 5 and vying for national championships. And he's, and Brian's definitely taken that first step. So, and then when you get the momentum too, the first step's usually the hardest. So, if he can keep that going, then, they've definitely got a chance to do really well in the future.
Well, and you mentioned it. I mean, this program's both in the men and the women haven't had a lot of success recently. The men's prior to last year, the last time they made the NCAA tournament was 2005. Kyle Lovett last year became the first player ever in the history of the program to make the NCAA tournament as a singles tournament. So, what was it like when you came over here? Taking over a program that's not really traditionally a tennis power or a tennis program. You're coming from Oklahoma, national title contender, powerhouse program. Now you're starting this program really from scratch.
Yeah. I mean, it was different. I mean, there's parts of it that were different, but in our world of tennis, Florida is the epicenter of tennis in the world. A lot of the top players in the world. Andy Murray trains in Miami. My brother, we grew up playing in Florida. So you have all Sebastian Gross. I mean, you go through the list from Jimmy Connors to, just all throughout the history of tennis. You're gonna Maria Sharapova. I mean, I named literally almost everybody has spent time training in Florida. And then you have some of the biggest tournaments with the Miami Open. Delray Beach. The women have their tournaments as well, the WTA events. So it's just a place where all the whether you're American or foreign, you end up spending a ton of time in Florida. So. When I was looking at the opportunity here, it was different. It was definitely, I think I surprised some of the coaches in at least on the men's side for, coming, but I also knew what Danny White wanted to do here. He wants to develop national contenders, and I think tennis of all the sports we have is as good a shot or better, as anyone to win a national championship. And, we just have a lot of factors that point the right direction for tennis here. And, we just, UCF has done the job. Yeah, you still have to put resources into it, and that's what they wanted to do. So for me, it was a very intriguing opportunity because it was different, but it was definitely, you're definitely not building on historical accomplishments with the program. But, that being said, I mean, they've had good teams here in the past, and so they've had teams that have made the NCAA tournament. So that you can get to that level, and with the USTA national camps and those things, I feel like there's no reason we can't be competing for national titles here shortly, and that's the goal.
Well, and you mentioned the USTA National Campus. I know that was a big draw there. Everybody's glowing about that. It's open now for over a year. Of course, you got to host the American Conference Championships last year. In the future, you're going to be hosting the NCAA Championships. Now that you're a year into that facility, for those that are maybe not familiar, just talk about that facility and the impact it's already made. We're only just a year old.
Yeah, it's the first thing people say about it's a 100-court facility, but it's really divided up into different areas, from community tennis to player development, and then collegiate tennis, which is our part of the facility. So, there we have a very traditional college facility there with, 2 sets of 6 stadium courts that are literally mirror images of each other, with locker rooms and lounges and coaches off of them. It's just everything you would expect to see on a normal campus. But, we also throw in where we have indoor courts, we have, access to clay courts. There's pro tournaments that are played there. So, for us being able to base out of there is pretty incredible. It's just the place you want to be. When we bring recruits there, it's definitely different. I mean, if you're looking at going to Oklahoma, or you're looking to go to, Texas, and guys coming on recruiting trips, a lot of times these recruits will stack their trips together, so they're going from one to the other over the course of a week. And, when they come to UCF now, it's different, and recruiting, that's awesome because you can spend a lot of time and whether they come or they don't come, they can make their decision on UCF very quickly. Because ours, if you don't want to play tennis as a collegiate athlete here and on the tennis team, then we're not the place for you because that's what we're all about, and we have so many opportunities for kids to play, whether it's collegiately, professionally, and that's where we're getting a lot of the interest, where kids just have a lot more opportunity to see where they stand in the tennis world. Whether it's their collegiate ranking, their pro ranking. They're just going to get a lot more opportunities because of where we're based.
You got Michigan this Saturday. They're a top 10 team in the country when it comes to men's tennis here in the ITA rankings. The women's, by the way, for Michigan is also ranked 25th. But you got a tough stretch coming up. You got a lot of home matches coming up as well. After kind of a break in the between there, you had a match with Stetson recently, but you're winning 4 in a row. But you got Baylor coming up on Monday. They're ranked 32nd in the country. You got Penn State, Virginia, Minnesota, which is ranked 33rd. Just talk about the philosophy and how you build a schedule going into the season.
Yeah, one thing about our rankings is it's basically an RPI, and they switch over from voting to the computer rankings. They did that about a week or 2 ago. So this is the second computer ranking that we have. And, I mean, honestly, I'm not trying to bash on our ITA because I think they do a fantastic job with a lot of things, but I'm not saying something that they don't already know, that I don't believe we should be releasing these computer rankings right now, because you take a team like Baylor, and Michigan is a very good team. So that means top 10 is, you could easily make an argument before the season that they were a top 10 team, where Baylor is 32 and they're a top 10 team or top 15 team. So, so we don't look. I mean, they do an unpublished one, and I don't even know if I'm supposed to say or not, but I will. It's we were like 52 or 54 on it, and but it's something where we haven't even played our matches yet. We've played 6 matches. Other teams have played 11, 12, 13. We have 11 matches in March, and that's just the way we do our schedule, and we do it that way to give our kids more opportunity to play more professional tournaments, and that's why we do it. So we'll always be on these first couple computer rankings of lagging behind a little bit, but that's okay because it's where you finish. I think our kids understand that, our recruits understand that, but the rankings always sort themselves out. I mean, the one thing I will say about it is the rankings formula they have by mid-April, they're very, very accurate and they're very good, and there's I kind of like not having humans involved on that, and but we just, as coaches, we know better than to pay attention to what they are now. But, going against Michigan is a big opportunity because we know they're going to stay up there in those rankings. They're going to be, in my mind, I think they're a top 10 team, without a doubt a top 20 team, depending on how a few matches go for them. So, it's a great opportunity, but it's a little hard to tell where everyone stands right now, because one year we finished, I think, going to the tournament number 1 in the country, and at the same week of these rankings we were like 35. So they're a little quirky, but it's matches like this weekend that start to straighten everything out.
Kind of reminds me of college football, and the same problem. They have these polls in August when nobody's played. They get a jump start. So, I know it's different sports and the calculations are different, but it's kind of silly. You're right. The rankings this early, nobody really knows because teams are just starting not even halfway in.
Yeah, it's like the old BCS era when they start using all the computer ones and the human ones would be way off. Teams would move 4 or 5 spots, and in college football, it's a lot. And in tennis, you'll literally go from being ranked 12 on the human poll, and because they know who's on your team, they've been playing well. But it all depends on your strength of schedule in the first month of the season. Our strength of schedule is in March. In early April. It's not in January and February, and that's our schedule is always going to have to be like that because of the way our schedule sets up with other tournaments. So so it is a little crazy, but I keep voting for him to move it back at least 2 more weeks, because I think every week it's later, there's more results, and the more results, the more accurate it ends up being. So. But it's a good opportunity for a lot of people. If you're recruiting, you want to schedule a little tougher early on. You get a couple wins, and right before signing day, you can say you're 20 in the country. You may not finish there, but so there's a lot of angles you can kind of take with it. But I've just kind of taken the angle we're not going to worry about it, and we'll recruit the best players we can and see where it falls. Because like I said, they do a great job of the ranking at the end. It's just the beginning that a lot of people, they just know that it takes time to straighten out.
What drew you to get into college coaching?
Well, I was coaching my brother on tour for 2006, 7, 8 full time. Worked with him a lot before that when he was home. When he was working with Brad Gilbert. When he was practicing in Texas, I would be the one that would kind of work with him a lot there. For those 3 years, I traveled 35 weeks out of 52 on the road and all over the world. That is great, and it's a great experience. And going to those tournaments and, trying to game plan against Federer and Nadal and Murray coming up and Novak and just being a part of that era, was unbelievable. But the travel is tough, and for me as a player, the time that I had the best time playing tennis was when I was a college player. So it was in the back of my mind. I knew that at some point I'd always try to be a college head coach and go that route, because it's just I think I said earlier, the format we have is the most fun, and just being a part of a team every year and being able to create the team, and recruit and get kids that you want to have on the team is a lot of fun. So, and then, we travel a lot as college coaches, but, it's one thing I don't complain about is the travel, because I know if I do the other, it can double in a hurry. So I think those are the biggest factors. But I think the biggest factor is the format we play, and just being a part of a team and a university community, with athletics and, being able to go to baseball games and know the coach and football and get excited. There's just a lot more, there's a lot more to it. And, your quality of life is really good as a college coach.
I remember I interviewed you when you arrived here at UCF. I asked you what was the biggest thing you would change about the sport of tennis. You brought up the Davis Cup and the format, that it's a year-round, and I must have heard you, because this week it just so happens, Coach, that the Davis Cup is now trying to change the format for 2019, where they're going to do it at the end of the year for 1 week, 18 countries, a round-robin format, followed by a knockout stage in the quarterfinals. First of all, I guess you got a big power. They heard you, I guess. But is this a step in the right direction? Do you like this?
I mean, if you think about it, as big as the Grand Slams have come in sports, I mean, the prize money's through the roof. The TV ratings are high. The advertising dollars are incredibly high. And now you put this team event, which, in my mind, if you see NCAA tennis and you go to the finals, like if you go watch Georgia play at Georgia, or now you can watch the USA or France win the Davis Cup in their respective country, or try. I mean, you're going to have the best atmosphere in sports, and I think honestly it's going to be an event that starts to rival. I don't know, you're never going to supplant the World Cup, but it's going to be in that conversation as one of the biggest sporting events in the world. It's going to be like Ryder Cup. You take Ryder Cup and now you take tennis, and it's literally the World Cup of tennis, and they're going to do it every year, and it's a week. And for the pro players, it eliminated, for the guys who are in the finals of Davis Cup, it eliminated 3 weeks off the calendar, which is, people don't realize all the little things that go into it. That's huge. So that's another 21 days, where either they can create a couple more tournaments, or they can eliminate it from the calendar. And that's unbelievable for these players, because they're going to have it at the year end. It's a long year, but if there's one event these guys are going to get up for, it's Davis Cup and playing for their country, especially when they know it's only a week commitment now instead of committing to Davis Cup. And if you keep winning, it's a minimum 2 week in the old system, and if you're in the finals, it's a 4-week commitment. So it's a month out of your year. So it's a great step in the right direction. And it's tennis is hard to get everyone moving the same direction at the same time, and I'm really excited that we're doing that, because I think it'll elevate the whole sport. In 5 years, we can revisit the conversation and see the impact that this has, and it's going to be, it's going to be as big as when Billie Jean King started the WTA, stuff like that. It's going to have that big of an impact.
Well, and like I said, it's great. I'm excited to see that coming out. You mentioned you coached your brother Andy for a long time. He won a major, U.S. Open in 2003. He didn't win more majors because he usually ran into a guy named Roger Federer, who was the best player in the world. And here we are. He's still the best player in the world. Rafael Nadal is still the second best player in the world. So not much has changed since you left the Pro Tour. How do you describe for the audience may not be aware what we're watching here with Roger and Rafa, what they're doing at their age?
You're watching in our sport. You're watching Michael Jordan, but there's 2 or 3 of them. I mean, you got to throw Novak into that conversation as well. And then you take a guy like Andy Murray. I mean, he's especially if you remove those other 3, and my brother knocked him out of the late in a couple of majors too. You're talking about some of the greatest players of all time in our sport playing at the same time. And that's the benchmark for being an all-time great. I mean, it used to be like 3 or 4 majors, and these guys are going to 12 to what it was Roger at now, 18 or 19. I mean,
20.
20. I mean, I don't even know how I didn't get that, but I mean, that's absurd. I mean, it's crazy to get to that number in our sport. When you have a career of it, you're not going to play much past 35, and I mean, maybe they are. I don't know. I mean, maybe they're just superhuman, but you're watching the best of all time in our sport, and it'll take. I mean, it's going to take a long time before you see these kind of players again. I mean, I remember sitting there watching the level, and just seeing and trying to game plan against what we have to do, and looking at unforced errors versus winners, and how well they play the big points and tiebreakers won, and going through all these stats and analytics, and it's just amazing to sit there and see these guys still doing that for 15 years. I mean, at the highest level and staying injury free. And my brother had by most accounts a fairly long career. He stopped when he was 30. He probably could have taken 6 months off and kept playing, but they take the life out of you when you think you have to play at that level. And for him, the hardest thing was deciding whether or not he thought he could win another major, and those guys just present such an obstacle. And so but to sit here and watch it now, where I don't really have a vested interest in it. I can just watch the tennis, and I mean it's pretty incredible to watch.
It really is amazing to watch, and certainly exciting. And I think also, I think your brother's career now is looked at differently now. I think more people appreciate your brother's career more now than they even did back when he was playing, because of the roadblocks he had to go to. Don't you? Have you gotten the sense of that now, that what you guys did, now you get more appreciated than maybe you did as you were doing it?
Yeah, because I think, when Andy was struggling with Roger, I mean, he had a pretty good record against Rafa and Novak. I mean, I think he had a winning record for a while against Novak until later in his career. So when we play those guys, and when you're looking at, and you knew if Andy played well that he could beat Murray, he could beat Novak, and he could beat Rafa, not on clay, although he played great against him one time on clay in Davis Cup. So I knew as a coach, okay, if we go out and he goes out and executes, and we have a good game plan, and he sticks with it, then he has a very good shot to win the match. You're looking at better than 50% chance to win a match against those guys. Roger was just a different animal for Andy. The matchup was tough for him, and he figured out a little bit more later in his career and got a few wins on him late in the career, which is looking back even more incredible. But I mean, you can't. Andy I think it's something like 8 times to Roger in the quarterfinals or later of a major. Every final of a major he lost was to Roger. So, you can't look back now and the guy's won 20 majors. We were comparing it when Roger had won like 6 or 7 and thinking, okay, you got to beat this guy. Well, nobody really beats this guy when he's healthy. Maybe Rafa on clay is the only guy that's been able to beat Roger consistently on a surface. And, even when you look at how many times Roger's been in the finals of the French Open and his only losses to Rafa, you can almost make an argument that he's the, second, third, or fourth best clay quarter of all time. And that's just how dominant the guy is.
No, it's incredible. He's amazing to watch. Last thing, Coach, now as you get set for the rest of the season, you got Michigan obviously on Saturday, and then beyond that, what's going to be the keys for your team to accomplish all the internal goals you have?
Well, we have to play well in doubles. I think if we can get the doubles point, and that's a little bit of a coin flip. I mean, that's one of those parts of tennis where in college tennis, Georgia's a top 10 team in the country right now, and they won the doubles point against Mercer in a tiebreaker, and that's just how close doubles is because it's a pretty short format. So we know if we go and play well, we've been in every doubles point we've had. We haven't been blown out one time in doubles, so we know we can stick our nose in there and give ourselves a chance to win the doubles point. If we do that, and then going into singles, if we deal with adversity well, we can't go out and expect to not lose our serve or not have the guy. Some guys take sets. If we deal with things that happen that we don't want to see happen, but at the end of the day, as tennis players, you have to realize that you can't be perfect in this sport, and we just have to deal with the negative things that are going to happen in a match. And if we deal with it well and don't let that affect our level, then I think we can win the match. But and I'm sure Michigan thinks if they go out and execute well, they will win the match. So, Michigan's definitely the favorite, but I also know if we do the things that we need to do and execute fairly well and just don't let things bother us and don't get negative, then, we definitely have a chance. I know if we do that, we can play with anyone in the country, but, being very young, that's a big challenge for us sometimes.
That's John Roddick, Director of Tennis here at UCF Tennis, the men's head coach. UCF men and women's tennis will take on Michigan on Saturday, 12:30 p.m. It'll be televised on the Tennis Channel. It's part of College Match Day, but we encourage you to do what I will be doing, which is going out there to the USTA National Center up at Lake Nona and catch the action live in person. Should be a fun atmosphere. Coach, appreciate you the time from the busy schedule. Good luck, and hope to see you there on Saturday, if not down the road.
All righty. Thanks for having me.
And thanks again to John Roddick, the Director of Tennis for UCF and the head coach, talking, again, big match, UCF and Michigan, 12:30 on Saturday. A match will be on the Tennis Channel, but certainly come out to the Lake Nona. As I mentioned, I'm going to try and head out there, College Match Day. But awesome to have Coach Roddick on, who, as you heard there, Jeff, not shy to throw his opinions around when it comes to the ranking system or kind of the state of the sport. And, I talked to him about the Davis Cup format change when we had him on a year ago. He said they needed to change the Davis Cup format, and here we are a year later, and they're changing the format. The guy, he's
he knows
brilliant.
What he's talking
and I'm
about, guys.
I do, and I'm going to say this again. And I know for all the great hires that Danny White has done, all right, Scott Frost, right, boom, Johnny Dawkins, boom,
Coach Abe,
boom.
Greg Lovelady,
boom, yep. Right. I mean, everything, nailed everything. To me, the most impressive thing that he has done, to me, in my opinion, is what he has done with UCF's tennis program. And I talked to Coach Roddick about it. This was, no disrespect to anybody in the past, but this was not considered a tennis program powerhouse, right? This was not a deal. But here we are, what he has done by bringing in John Roddick. Think about it. To me, it's the most impressive thing. John Roddick is one of the best coaches in the country. He came from Oklahoma. And he talked about, and we heard there in the interview, part of the reason why he came here. So John Roddick not only is obviously the head coach of the men's program, but he runs the women's, he's the director of tennis. So he oversees the women's program. He's the one that made the hire of Brian Konecko. And here we are, Jeff, talking about UCF tennis in a major television broadcast against major programs in an incredible facilities with programs that we're talking about postseason aspirations. It blows my mind away that this is where we're at. And to me, it's the most impressive thing that I've seen him done, because I didn't think it was possible that this would even be imaginable, let alone reality.
Well, here we go. I think we're going to find out, like we said. We've talked about how their schedule sort of shapes up with the powerhouse teams that they are bringing down. And like it said, we said it starts with this Michigan match coming up, and then these are all at home. Baylor, Penn State, Virginia, Minnesota, Indiana, Miami, Arkansas, Princeton, Oklahoma State, or they're at Oklahoma State, and then they're at Tulsa, and they're at Memphis, and then back home for USF on April 15th to finish out the season. This is a murderer's row schedule, but he wouldn't have scheduled the team like this if he didn't think his team would be able to make their way up the ITA rankings. Right now, they are not ranked in the ITA. But I mentioned some of those teams that I mentioned. Michigan, Illinois.
Don't started. Don't get him started on the rankings. You just heard him talk about the rankings. And what
It's true.
So don't bring that up again.
Okay. All right, I'll leave that alone.
He made the comparison to the BCS and the formula, and and I agree with him. I mean,
That's
I think
fair.
it is still early. He made good points. I don't disagree with it. Put it that way. By the way, a couple things. Thanks to Frank Schala, who is helping out on the communications side, helping Ian out with UCF tennis. He helped set up this interview with Coach Roddick. So I want to give a shout out to Frank. Known him for a long time, helping out with that interview. So, and then number 2, and Frank brought it up, man. We're coming out. Are we coming out to see them? I think I'm going to go out Saturday, Jeffrey. I think you should come out too. Bring out Connor. Bring out, we all know you named him after Jimmy Connors. You can deny it all you want, but you can come out here and catch a little tennis with Connor on Saturday. I mean, they've got a great slate. I'm going to try and head out there to see the facilities for the first time, because I know people have been bringing that up.
This Saturday is going to be tough, but I got that March 18th Sunday match with Miami kind of circled. That might be interesting. I might want to come down and check that out a little bit later.
Right.
So I'll have to get in touch with Frank and see what we do. But yeah, nonetheless, here we are with just getting ready for this long stretch at home, and I think we're going to get our chance here in the month of March. March Madness indeed down at the USTA National Campus for UCF men's tennis. Again, catch them on the Tennis Channel, 12:30 p.m. Saturday against Michigan for College Match Day. UCF men's tennis making some noise here for UCF. So thanks again to Coach Roddick for his time as well. All right. Real quick, I got a couple news stories that I wanted to hit. 4 UCF student athletes were given the highest award that a UCF student can possibly receive from the university this week, the Order of Pegasus. The 4 student athletes who received the Order of Pegasus this year: Anthony Catati of men's basketball, Bailey Ranson from women's track and field, Taylor Wicke from volleyball, and Matt Wright from football. It is a very prestigious award to receive. And by the way, what's interesting is there have been only 10 UCF student athletes who've received the Order of Pegasus award in the entire history of the program. First one was Sarah Qureshi of track and field back in 2001. Eric Lopez. Shelley Frick is the only softball representative to have taken this award. But some other notable names, T.J. Harnden, Brendan Dobbins, Kaylee Keough, Chelsea Lausanne, Kaelise Green, Arjun Watane, Joey Scott from football won it, Joey Grant from football, and Hallie Scott from volleyball last year won the Order of Pegasus. So congratulations to Anthony, Bailey, Taylor, and Matt on a job well done. Football, real quick. They announced a schedule announcement. By the way, the spring game is set for April 21st, 6 p.m., but UCF did announce, actually just before we started recording this, that they are adding 2 games with North Carolina on the future schedule. UCF plays at North Carolina this coming season, and then the Tar Heels come here in 2020. So they added 2 more. At Chapel Hill in 2024, scheduled for September 21st of 2024, and then September 20th of 2025, UNC comes back here. So there was a little bit of a tease that went out on social media that people were like, oh, come on, man. Everybody got really excited about, and then all of a sudden everyone realized it was North Carolina, like doubling up, and people, some of the reaction on social media to that I thought was a little bit heavy-handed. It's like, listen, I will take playing an ACC team anytime. All right, so anything about this announcement that you found interesting with UNC doubling up with us here?
Not really. I actually no. I mean, it was kind of like, okay, whatever. I mean,
I'll take
fine.
it. Sure.
I mean,
cool.
I think where the fans got upset is when you kind of teased it. Hey, this big announcement at 3:30. I think they were expecting something
everyone
different.
was waiting for Bama. Everyone was waiting.
I don't know
for
about that.
Alabama.
I'm not going to go that far. I hope not. I hope they were not. So I think if this was just randomly announced, or if this would have been announced, say, during the weekend of the North Carolina game, I don't even think people would like, oh, okay, whatever.
Yeah.
It's cool.
By the way,
I like Chapel Hill.
Yeah, those 2 games, by the way, are the furthest out. I'm looking at fbschedules.com. Those are the furthest out future opponents that we see as of right now. So
yeah, it's fine. Look, Chapel Hill is a fun place. You hope that North Carolina football kind of turns around. They had a bad year last year, so but it's fine. I mean, it's cool. It's it's fine.
It's right. Call me up in 2024. So mark your calendars.
Yeah, right. I mean, that's the other problem. I mean, it's hard to get fired up about a game in 6 years from now. You know, whatever.
Yeah,
who knows what
we're not printing the T-shirts yet. Softball. Eric Lopez is 9-6. They are coming off of at the Green and Gold Classic in Jacksonville. The Knights won 3 out of 5. The 3 wins were against Penn State 4-0. They run-ruled Western Carolina, and then they beat the home team Jacksonville 5-3. Losses, they actually split with Western Carolina. They played in 2 games. They lost the first game 7-3, and then lost to number 23 James Madison, which is a perennial softball power, 3-2. Upcoming games for UCF, they head out to San Diego to play in the San Diego Classic. Thursday at San Diego State, Friday against Long Beach and number 3 UCLA, and then they play Santa Clara on Saturday. So Coach Gillespie doing her West Coast road trip coming up. Your thoughts real quick as you follow the team at the tournament in Jacksonville and then with the San Diego tournament coming up. They're 9-6 right now. How are you feeling?
Well, first, a couple things. You mentioned the Jacksonville tournament. The win against Jacksonville was the program's 600th.
That's right.
In program history, which I go in depth on blackandgoldbanneret.com.
2,500 words worth of depth.
That's the beauty of the blog,
have to
man.
Edit
You gave
me
the well, job well done. Job well done.
You,
hey, look, it's a lot of crap. I wasn't expecting to break down. I think I didn't even realize I counted 54 games I mentioned, and I try to keep it short. But there's a lot of wins, and it tells you on the success that the program has had. Coach G had her 850th win of her career against Penn State on that Friday night. Mm-hmm. The big story, and again, this is why you need to listen to Black and Gold Banneret, because if you listen to last week's episode, I said that Cameron Toney, the starting pitcher, was cleared to play. I didn't know when she would play, but I knew she was cleared. And boy, big boost, pitching a one-hit shutout in the victory against Western Carolina. So that's a big boost for them in that pitching staff.
Yeah.
They've been shorthanded up until this point. That's a big arm that they needed. Look, they got a really tough weekend. I'm not going to lie. I'm going to be up late following these games, but they got San Diego State Thursday night at San Diego State. San Diego State, I know their record's not great. They've had some injuries, but this was a team that really got robbed out of making the NCAAs last year. They should have been in the NCAAs. They were the number 1 offense in the NCAA last year, hit a tremendous batting average. Stacey Newman, 4-time Olympian, as their assistant associate coach on that team. So that's a test. You look at their games on Friday. Long Beach State is very good. They just knocked off Auburn up at Palm Springs last weekend.
Is a
They're very
power,
good.
if I'm not mistaken, right?
They've been good. Yeah. They're going to be a real threat to Fullerton in the Big West. And then, of course, we all know about UCLA, who's a national title contender like they are every year. They're loaded. So that's the 2 games they got Friday. And then they finish off with an early morning game against Santa Clara on Saturday. If they can, in my opinion, Jeff, if they can go 2-2, I would take it to the bank, because this is a tough trip, tough teams. You're out west. West Coast umpires, you're not going to get the benefit of the doubt on some calls. Let's just kind of cut to the chase on that. So, big test for this young team that's still a work in progress. And after this, they've got a nice stretch where they don't have to get on a plane until the Easter weekend when they go up to Houston, I believe. So, this is a big weekend. If you can go 2-2 in this tournament, I would consider that a success. So hopefully they could do that, and we'll see if they can. But this is a tough stretch, especially that Friday with Long Beach and UCLA back-to-back. That is an incredible time period, and we'll see how they adjust to that.
You're not doing Renee any favors by calling the umpires up before they even get on the plane.
Well, I just know from experience. That's all, okay? I'm just getting – so when people ask me about it later on, the unfortunate thing about the James Madison game, they had a threat in the 7th inning, 2 runners on, and I forget the hitter. The hitter for UCF hits a line drive. It hits the runner, and this is they hit the runner. It's an automatic out.
Yeah, you're out.
If that ball doesn't hit the runner, that gets through. It's a completely different inning. UCF maybe wins that game. And talking to the people that were there, so that was disappointing, because that would have been a nice top 25 win to get against James Madison. But they got some opportunities for some quality wins this weekend up there out west. But that'll be interesting. Late night, baby. I'll be up late night on Twitter, so follow me on Eric Lopezilo. I'll be tweeting late night.
Is there a
Friday
video
night,
feed for that tournament? I see live stats, but I don't see any. I don't see any video link.
I believe that the San Diego State game has video. I believe it's like the Mountain West Network Online or something like that. I believe. I don't know about the others, but I will tweet it out if I find it. I promise. So follow again, Eric Lopez.
Let's. It's hosted by San Diego State and the University of San Diego. So, yeah, I don't see anything mentioning television, but.
No, I think it's online. Anything that's video will probably be online. There will be new, and I think San Diego State game might have video because they do some video for their home games.
It should
so that's
be.
About it. I don't know if
it should be noted, by the way, that UCF, that the only non-California teams or the only non-West Coast teams in this tournament are UCF, Boston University, and the University of Minnesota.
Yep.
Well, I guess theoretically you could call Colorado State a non-Pacific Coast team, but they're still out west. But other than stiff competition out there for this tournament. So we'll be watching that for you, and follow Eric Lopez Elo for the latest breakdown as UCF heads out west for this big tournament. Boy, I hope you're right. I hope they can come out with at least a split. Man, if they find a way to knock off UCLA, that would be something. That would really.
It would. I would be ecstatic.
Baseball 5-3 right now. They are coming off the 3-game sweep of Savannah State, where they shut out Savannah State in the first 2 games, 4-0, 6-0, and then racked up 15 runs on Sunday. And then at Bethune-Cookman at Jackie Robinson Ballpark, they knock off the Wildcats 6-1. Coming off of that game, you're by the way, J.J. Montgomery got the start in that Bethune-Cookman game, and looked really good for UCF. 5 2/3, gave up just 1 hit, walked 2, struck out 6, and then Creme Finfrock actually came in relief, and I will say this. Thad, by the way, Thad Ward also in middle relief, and then Bryce Tucker. But J.J. Montgomery has been as advertised, and we don't have Brian Murphy on this show, but make sure you follow him at Spokes_Murphy. We'll have Brian on again, I'm pretty sure, very, very soon to check us in more with UCF baseball. But this pitching staff, actually, if they can get him, if they can get Montgomery and really worked into the rotation, because he's another one of these transfers, things could look really good for UCF baseball as they have a 3-game set coming up against Wagner at home at John Juliano Park Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, which you can catch on UCFnights.tv. But, after that 3-game losing streak to Rice, Samford, and Stetson, they really needed that sweep of Savannah State and then the win at Bethune-Cookman. So now they're 5-3, and they've won 4 in a row, Eric. So, again, it comes down to
just
pitching.
like everybody overreacted when they lost those 3 games. I'm not going to overreact when they win these 4 games. Just
like Brian told us, right? Just like Brian told us,
The game that I'm looking forward to, with all due respect to Wagner, Tuesday night, the defending national champ, Florida Gators will be in town. I will be there. That'll be fun. I expect, you mentioned Montgomery. I think he's lined up to start that game, and that'll be fun to see how he does. Yeah, I think that's what Coach Lovelady's setting it up, and that'll be a fun atmosphere. It should be fun. That'll be a fun day. I got a doubleheader of softball that day. UCF's got Virginia Tech, another good team, by the way, and then Ball State, and then from there I'm heading over to baseball. That's a big day on that Tuesday. Big monster week of sports in town next week.
We're still locked into this Equinox thing, man, and the way basketball's looking, they're going to be playing we're going to have UCF basketball for another 2 weeks. Be it women's or men's or maybe even both. I mean, it's a busy time. This is the busiest time of year. When I worked in the video department, I mean, we were pulling 16-hour days, 7 days a week at this point, just getting everything done. I mean, it was crazy. Godspeed, you guys over at UCF, because this is one hell of a stretch.
There you go.
Yeah.
We may have to do multiple podcasts next week. We're probably going to do a basketball special and then the other stuff. That's how big next week will be. So.
I know. We may have to do that. We may have to do an emergency podcast if something crazy happens. All kinds of stuff. So, like Eric said, the 3-game set against Wagner this weekend, And then Florida comes to town Tuesday, March the 6th, 6:30 p.m. Then the Knights actually go on the road to Gainesville the next day, Wednesday, 6 p.m. first pitch up in Gainesville. And we want to get that out there. Obviously, we'll probably record next Wednesday just after the conclusion of that game. So, all right, Eric Lopez, I think you mentioned a little bit about this, but other than the craziness that you got going on, what do you have coming up this weekend that we're going to be keeping an eye on?
Yeah, I'm going to try and go out to the tennis match against Michigan on Saturday. Hopefully I can do that. And obviously I'll be at the Wichita State game Thursday here tonight. And we'll go from there. So who knows? I'll be following the softball. Probably getting ready for the men's basketball championships next week in Orlando. We might record that even earlier in the week just to get people ready for that tournament to start from a lot of different angles. And then baseball, obviously. I mean, softball, you know it. I'll be around there. And,
I'll be following things as well. I don't know which games I'm going to get to right now because of because obviously I'm watching the baby a lot. But
there you go.
But we've got I'm hoping that I can get to a little bit of basketball here in a little bit. And again, like we said, follow not just UCFKnights.com, but also follow the conference at theamerican.org for all the latest with UCF women's basketball as they make their way up to Connecticut next week for the American Athletic Conference tournament. And of course, UCF men's basketball finishing up this weekend as well with those two games at home, especially that game against Wichita State on Thursday. Number 11, Wichita State. So let's wrap this thing up. Don't forget you can follow us at blackandgoldbanneret.com for all the latest news and analysis of your UCF sports from across the sports spectrum. You can follow us at facebook.com/blackandgoldbanneret and UCF_banneret on Twitter. You can also hit us up individually at Jeff_Sharon, Eric Lopez Elo, and our boy Brian Murphy, Spokes_Murphy. And, of course, don't forget Derek Warden, _DS Warden, who continues to pump out some amazing photographs that we use, obviously, with our articles as much as we can, but also for you, that you can see his galleries and the incredible work that he does as well. Don't forget to leave us a rating here on iTunes as well, Apple Podcasts, wherever fine podcasts are downloaded for free. Google Play, iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, TuneIn, you name it. Search for us, Black and Gold Banneret podcast for all your on your feed, and make sure you tell your friends about us too. So as we wrap it up here, Eric Lopez, it's been grand. Have fun down at tennis, and I'll see you soon this weekend, bud.
See you.
All right, and thank you for joining us. This has been the Black and Gold Banneret podcast. We will catch you next week.
Today's episode is brought to you by Cars.com. With over 2 million vehicles and 50,000 more added every day, Cars.com will match you with the perfect car for you, your budget, your life, your style. And if you're ready to say goodbye to your current car, Cars.com will get you an instant offer to cash it in. Just start by entering your license plate and get matched with a local dealer who will write you the check. So whether you're looking to buy or sell, just go to Cars.com. It's magical.